Most students think successful people have some secret routine. They imagine top students waking up at 5 a.m., studying for 10 hours straight, never getting distracted, never feeling lazy. But honestly, most high-performing students don't look impressive while they're becoming successful. Their habits are almost invisible, and that's exactly why people miss them. Because the habits that actually change your life usually don't feel dramatic in the moment. They feel small, boring, and easy to ignore. But over time, they completely separate average students from the ones who quietly level up. So if you've ever looked at someone and thought, how are they always ahead without looking stressed? This is for you. Most students don't fail because they're dumb. They fail because their days slowly fall apart in ways they don't even notice. You sit down to study, open your laptop, then suddenly you're checking one notification, then another, then telling yourself, I'll start in 5 minutes, and somehow it's midnight. You watch productivity videos, made a perfect timetable, maybe even bought new notebooks to restart your life. But deep down, you still feel inconsistent, like you're capable of more, but can't seem to access it. And this is the part nobody tells you. Successful students usually don't rely on motivation nearly as much as everyone else does. They build tiny systems that make good decisions automatic. That's the real difference. Not talent, not IQ, not being naturally disciplined, just invisible habits repeated so often that they become part of who they are. The first invisible habit is reducing friction. Most students make studying harder before they even begin. Their notes are disorganized, their desk is chaotic, their phone is beside them, and they don't even know what they're supposed to study first. So every session starts with resistance. But successful students make starting easy. They already know the first task, their materials are ready, and their environment removes distractions before they happen. It sounds simple, but imagine one student needing 20 minutes just to mentally prepare while another starts immediately. Over 6 months, that difference becomes massive. And the crazy part is the second student often isn't more motivated, they just made starting easier. So tonight, try setting up tomorrow's first study task before you sleep. Open the document, place the book on your desk, and write down the exact chapter. Make the starting line visible. Because successful students don't just depend on willpower, they design their environment. Another invisible habit is protecting energy more than time. Most students obsess over schedules, but high performers pay attention to their mental state. They notice when they're exhausted, overstimulated, burned out, or distracted. Because studying for 5 hours with a fried brain isn't productive, it just feels productive. A lot of students confuse suffering with progress, as if studying feels painful enough, then it must be working. But students who consistently succeed usually recover better. They sleep properly before exams, take short walks, and disappear from social media when their brain feels overloaded, not because they're lazy, but because they understand that a tired brain turns simple tasks into impossible ones. That's why some days, even opening a textbook feels heavy. It's not always a lack of discipline. Sometimes your brain is just exhausted from constant stimulation. So instead of asking, how can I force myself to study longer? Ask, how can I make studying feel mentally lighter? The third invisible habit is consistency over intensity. Successful students don't restart their lives every Monday. Average students are constantly saying, new month, new me, or this time I'll wake up at 5, or this time I'll study 12 hours, and then everything collapses 3 days later. But high performers think differently. Even on bad days, they still do something small, maybe 20 minutes of study, reviewing one topic, or solving 2 questions. Because every time you completely disappear from your habits, your brain starts associating progress with pressure. But when you stay consistent, even imperfectly, your identity changes. You stop being someone who tries to study and become someone who studies regularly. Most successful students don't have perfect routines. They just return faster after bad days. That's the real skill, recovery, not perfection. Another thing that quietly destroys students is constant comparison. You see someone posting their grades, study setup, internship, or productivity routine, and suddenly your own progress feels pathetic, even if you were doing fine 5 minutes earlier. But successful students understand that comparison destroys focus. When your attention constantly shifts toward other people's progress, you stop building your own. A lot of students aren't mentally exhausted because they work too hard. They're exhausted because they spend all day measuring themselves against everyone else. Social media makes this worse because you're comparing your real life to someone else's highlight reel. Most successful students move quietly. They're not always posting, announcing goals, or proving themselves. They're just working again and again in silence. And over time, that silence becomes results. And finally, the invisible habit that ties all of this together is keeping promises to yourself. Small ones. Saying you'll study for 30 minutes and actually doing it. Saying you'll wake up earlier and trying again tomorrow if you fail. It sounds tiny, but over time, it builds self-trust, and self-trust changes everything. Once you trust yourself, studying feels different. You stop negotiating with every task, stop depending on random bursts of motivation, and become reliable to yourself. That's what discipline really is, not punishment or suffering, but building evidence that you can rely on yourself. So if there's one thing to remember, it's this. The students who succeed aren't always the smartest. They're usually the ones with invisible habits that quietly compound every day, making starting easier, protecting their energy, staying consistent after bad days, ignoring unnecessary comparison, and keeping small promises to themselves. None of these habits looks impressive in one moment, but together they completely change your future. So don't wait for some massive life reset. Try one small invisible habit tonight. Maybe prepare tomorrow's study space. Maybe study for just 20 focused minutes. Maybe sleep earlier for once. Start small, but start today, because the life you want is usually built through habits nobody notices at first.